For anyone who was alive when it happened, I don't need to tell you what a huge deal the Gulf War was. At the risk of dating myself, I remember being in grade school and handwriting letters to US servicemen to send overseas, and I still have a box of the original Desert Storm trading cards. It was just an incredibly popularly supported and internationally supported war, and it gave rise to just some of the biggest names of the era. Right? You had Saddam Hussein, you have Colin Powell, you have the Scud missiles, you have Patriot missiles, but all the names, all the weapons, the machinery, none of them just loom as large over that entire Gulf War as one man. And that's the commander of CENTCOM, the highly decorated American hero and 4-star general, H. Norman Schwarzkopf. Now, I'm honored to say that we have a sizable portion of General Schwarzkopf's collection in our December 5th through 7th premier firearms auction. Highlights are here in front of me, but I can't encourage you enough to go online, look at the catalog, and see the full listings of not only his military arms, his sporting arms, his early American arms, and antiques as well. It's an incredible collection, and you won't be disappointed. Of course, the career of Stormin' Norman, or the Bear, his preferred nickname, extends far beyond Operation Desert Storm and the whole Gulf War. In fact, it starts at a fairly early age, following in his father's footsteps. Norman Schwarzkopf Sr., who attends West Point, fights in the Great War, and then finds himself on several tours and assignments in Europe and also in the Middle East. And it's at age 12 where our younger General Schwarzkopf, or future General Schwarzkopf, finds himself almost literally following in his father's footsteps, accompanying him on some military tasks, but also really going hunting for the first time in Tehran, Iran. And he gets the bug for both, a life of military service and for hunting, things that are in those formative years going to set the stage for General Schwarzkopf, who, once he comes of age, also finds himself at West Point Academy. Doesn't, of course, find himself in the Great War, but does instead find himself in the jungles of Vietnam, and where he really begins an exemplary military service record. He is serving with South Vietnamese paratroopers and special forces right by that Cambodian border. A very intense place to serve during the Vietnamese War, and he leaves Vietnam with as decorated as his service deserves. He leaves with 3 silver stars, 3 bronze stars, 2 purple hearts, and a Legion of Merit. As you would expect from someone who has earned that level of decoration, his career in post-Vietnam military life, of course, takes off. He finds himself ascending the ranks, finds himself accepting, assignments of greater and greater importance. And then in 1983, sort of at the last minute, he's thrust into this command group for the invasion of Grenada. He's leading these initial landing operations. Now, as we all know, the invasion of Grenada isn't a shining moment for the US military, but Schwarzkopf's performance speaks for itself before, and it spoke for itself then, sort of in spite of the last minute involvement. 5 years later, in 1988, he finds himself the commander of US CENTCOM, like United States Central Command. And of course, 2 years later, in 1990, that puts him in a position to be leading and planning all coalition forces, like the Coalition of the Willing, in Operation Desert Shield, and of course, the subsequent Operation Desert Storm. And it's a massive success, to put it mildly. It's the 100-hour war, right? In less than 5 days, the overwhelming force of the Americans takes care of Iraqi forces, and almost instant celebrity overnight. And he's a national hero, a media darling, if you will. He hosts, of course, famously the mother of all press conferences. And he comes back quite a bit different than he probably experienced when he came back from Vietnam, as the celebrity general the victorious general. He's paraded down Broadway in New York. He's paraded in Washington, D.C. in front of the president. Later on, he's knighted by Queen Elizabeth II, and he receives distinguished service medals from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Coast Guard. He is flying high, and it's a bit of a surprise perhaps to some people that he leaves while he's on top. In 1991, he retires from the Army, gives him a lot of time for the hunting that he loves so much, for the sporting clays that he loves so much, pens a couple books as well, and really leads to a more relaxed period in the general's life. Now, in looking at General Schwarzkopf collection, or at least highlights of it, I want to start with the gun that caught my eye right away, and it's this 1911 platform, and I know we just gave the biographical information of his life, a little background, and it's almost all encompassed on this 1911. Now, this is engraved in gold inlaid by Michael Duber, an extremely accomplished engraver and inlayer, as you're about to see. But it really does tell the tale. We can't go chronologically because it's sort of scattered all over the gun, but what better place to start than right here on the left side of the slide with this duty, honor, country, which is gold inlaid text in a platinum outlined border. This is gold and platinum all over. And of course, that's our motto of the West Point Military Academy. And of course, we have this West Point seal back here to accompany it, also inlaid in gold. As long as we're on the top of the slide, I'd like to talk about what's probably the coolest thing I've ever seen gold inlaid on a gun. And it's an F-14 Tomcat in 24 karat gold. It also has platinum exhaust trails coming out from behind it that wrap down the slide and go behind this banner that has General H. Norman Schwarzkopf also inlaid in gold on it. I've never seen a gold inlaid F-14 Tomcat before, and I certainly hope it's not the last time. Normally I would make a big deal like having this stuff all the way out by the muzzle. I mean, we even have our barrel bushing engraved in gold inlaid. There's not a spare centimeter on this gun that hasn't been given the full treatment by Michael Duber. On our bottom, we start in some of the Army career. We have our infantry crossed rifles. We have our combat infantryman's badge underneath the slide. We have our U.S. pin, gold star, appropriate for a 4-star general. On our magazine release, on our left side of the gun, we have our master parachutist badge, very appropriate for General Schwarzkopf, as well as the shoulder insignia for the 23rd Infantry Division, tucked right back here behind the grip. The whole gun tells a story, and it's phenomenal, the fact that everything we just discussed is encompassed on one gun. I'm betting this was an extremely special gun to General Schwarzkopf. Here on the back, there's a gold inlaid map of South Vietnam, specifically mentioned Du Ca, which again is where he's working with those South Vietnamese forces right by that Cambodian border. So to have that very specifically called out on the backstrap is incredibly special. On the front strap, Desert Storm in a banner. On the left side, his initials have been monogrammed or scrimshawed into these grips. And of course, the right grip with the 4 stars very proudly displayed. What an amazing gun. If I could have a gun that tells a life story, I would hope it would look like this. And everything that's not a specific chapter of his life is filled in with Duber's just incredible scroll work. Every square centimeter, from the slide release to the magazine release to the trigger guard, which he has signed on the front of Duber 96. Just an incredible piece, not only of art, but of military history as well. Next on the table, I'm gonna say easily the very nicest star model BM that I have ever seen. It is absolutely covered in gold damascene work. It's incredible. We have pearlite grips, all these, besides just the damascene patterns that are here, Star the Maker and Caliber is still done in gold. We have a bird on the left side. We have other creatures as well, but just how ornate these things are. And then of course, there's some hints. Now, we don't have any documentation with the gun, but there are clues, and I bet with a little research, one could really find where this gun originated in General Schwarzkopf's collection. So on these perlite grips, we have two medallions, right and left side. One medallion is of the Spanish Civil Guard, and the other one is the Spanish national coat of arms. Now again, we don't have documentation with this gun, but those are some darn good clues, because in the year 2000, General Schwarzkopf is on a fairly famous hunting trip to Spain with George Herbert Walker Bush, King Juan Carlos I of Spain, and oddly, Indiana Hoosiers basketball coach Bob Knight. And they're all hunting red-legged partridge in 2000 in Spain. So the two men are certainly connected. In fact, General Schwarzkopf goes back again, I believe maybe just with Bush in 2002 for a similar hunting trip. There's also the fact that King Juan Carlos I and Norman Schwarzkopf used one of these same outfitters for an African safari. Like there's photos of them using the same safari, even the same PH. So there are definite connections there. I'd love to dive into a biography, not only of Schwarzkopf's as well, but there might be additional clues in a Bush biography or documents, that cover Bush in the hunt since he was the president, where we might find exactly where this was presented to the general, because what an incredible star. You will not see a star model BM like that, maybe ever again. Next on the table, a gun that's a little closer to home because they're manufactured right here in Rock Island, Illinois, is a general officer's pistol, the Model 15. Of course, they're made at the Rock Island Arsenal, the shortened version of the, of course, legendary 1911. This one, a general officer model, RIA, Rock Island Arsenal, right here on the left side. If we look over here, serial number, general officer 608. Fairly telling, there's a table for those pistols, but you almost don't need it because right here, a plate on the left grip proudly says Schwarzkopf. So we have the general officer's pistol of General Norman Schwarzkopf. Normally, that would be special enough. General officer's pistols are collectible even for largely unknown generals. So when you have Schwarzkopf, it's on one level. What takes it to the next level is this one has documentation stating that not only is it his personal general officer's sidearm, but it was his personal sidearm during the 1983 invasion of Grenada. It doesn't get much more of a closer tie to a general than his personal sidearm, in knowing somewhere that it served a specific battle, especially one as notable as the invasion of Grenada, is just an incredibly special piece of military history. And now moving from the military arms to the other part of the general's life, which is hunting. General Schwarzkopf not only loved hunting for upland birds, also was an incredible sporting clays competitor, and did that in his later years. Really helped him focus, really enjoyed the sport. And so it's no surprise that there are many beautiful sporting arms, specifically shotguns, in this December 5th through 7th offering of the Schwarzkopf collection. Now it's actually a pair of Beretta 20 gauge shotguns. We have just one on the table, numbered 1 in gold, and this is retailed actually by Griffin & Howe. So not only we have Griffin & Howe markings here on the barrel, but the underside of our table also has Griffin & Howe in gold in a pattern that you normally see with that British rose and scroll engraving. Quail on one side, pheasants on the left, some of his favorite birds to hunt. And again, in a probably my favorite caliber for upland birds, 20 gauge. So of course he had excellent taste for that. Hand detachable, side locks, looks like a rounded action here and just dense, again, almost English style engraving over the whole thing, only interrupted really for those wonderful panel scenes. But of course, we have Griffin & Howe markings up here. Perhaps a more important marking comes past this long checkered straight grip stock down here to the initial plaque where we have H, N, S, and 4 stars on his initials plaque, and on a beautiful piece of wood, I might add. Again, this is a pair, only one on the table today. And last on the table, boy, if you receive a Beretta shotgun from the president of Beretta, you know it's going to be a good one. This one was presented by Ugo Beretta in 1991 to the general with just a number of personal touches. Of course, this is 1991, right? I don't know if this is pre or post retirement, but it's still, he's extremely famous at that time, and a known sportsman. So of course, someone like Beretta is going to give him a beautiful over under like this. Here, notably in the gold on the far side, right by the breech, especially made for General Norman Schwarzkopf. And Norman Schwarzkopf is just inlaid in script, which is a little extra difficulty, shows they really, took time for the general. We can almost start from back to front, a leather pad on the back, beautifully burled and figured walnut, very distinct and pretty thick, what I would consider wrist for an over under. Now, yes, it is a 12 gauge, but it also speaks to this being specially made for Norman Schwarzkopf. I mean, he was the bear for a reason, right? He was big and he was burly, in his own words. And so having something like this where he could have a little more purchase on it in his hands makes absolute sense. Pierced brake lever right here. On the left side, the golden head of a bear absolutely makes sense. Again, this is a personal gift to Schwarzkopf. So the fact that we have a bear here, you're not hunting bear typically with a 12 gauge shotgun. So definitely personalized for the general. And if we flip it over, here we have our quarry of a gold inlaid pheasant on what I could almost describe as like a proof coin finish, really using the reflective surface there and just sort of selectively, accented with engraving here and there by the artisans at Beretta. An extremely special shotgun and beautiful. And of course, I'd be remiss not to point out the 4 stars that have been kind of just tucked on the underside of the trigger guard there that have been inlaid in gold. And ladies and gentlemen, they're only the beginning. Not only are there sporting shotguns of the very highest quality, there's also very utilitarian. There's some that are set up for skeet and trap competition. He was a sport clay competitor. There's some military arms, as we mentioned. There's some flintlocks, early American arms. There's some antiques. There's some double rifles. As we mentioned earlier, the general did go on safari. So you can find all these in our December premiere firearms auction. On December 4th, we can't encourage you enough to come to our facility in Bedford, Texas. Put your hands on them. Come see all the detail of Michael Duber's work on this Colt, as well as all the guns in the Schwarzkopf collection in our December 5th through 7th premiere firearms auction. We'll see you there. Keep your powder dry.